This is Colin O'Keefe here for LXBN TV. In his final days as a United States Senator, Jay Rockefeller unveiled legislation that would subject drone operators to intense privacy regulations. Well, it's unlikely that the legislation will eventually become law just due to Rockefeller, of course, serving his last few days in office. This still does hint at what might be ahead on this front, and joining us to explain what might be ahead is attorney Jeff Kosseff. He's with Covington and Burling and author on the firm's blog Inside Privacy. Jeff, first, as you wrote, again, this legislation, stands next to no chance of actually becoming a law, but it does hint at, some priorities for Congress when it comes to drone legislation. Can you explain, why that's the case, what this is really hinting at, and I guess what the legislation encompasses as it exists right now?
Sure. Well, so what's important to note is right now, commercial users, unless they have a waiver, are not allowed to use drones right now unless the FAA grants a waiver. The FAA is, any day now, is going to issue a proposal, a notice of proposed rulemaking that would allow commercial users more broadly to operate drones. So because of this has raised a lot of concerns among members of Congress, among privacy advocates, about the privacy issues associated with commercial entities being able to operate drones. So this bill is really a reflection of what we've been hearing a lot from some members of Congress and some consumer advocates. As you said, Senator Rockefeller, he's retiring. He didn't run for re-election this year, so he will be leaving next month. He introduced this bill after Congress adjourned for the session, so practically there's no way that this bill could become law. But what's really important about this bill is Senator Rockefeller has been among the most aggressive privacy advocates in Congress. He's been chairman of the Senate Commerce Committee. So what he says really indicates what other members might be doing in the future. So that's really the importance of this bill, because it's really giving some insight into what we might expect next Congress from other members who are still there and who are aggressive on these issues. Now, in terms of the content of the bill, the most important thing to remember is it really governs the ability of entities to be able to use drones to gather information. It requires drone operators to gather prior express consent from individuals before they're able to gather any information or surveil individuals. And if they do not get this consent, they're required to anonymize any data that they collect. So that's really the key. The second portion of it is that it really puts the drone operators under very intense regulation by the Federal Trade Commission. It requires the drone operators to develop really detailed privacy policies. The bill would allow the FTC to very heavily regulate both the implementation of the policies and what's in the policies, and really gives the FTC significant oversight over the operators' use of drones. And something that's very concerning is that it allows both the FTC and states' attorneys general, as well as private parties, to bring actions against companies that they believe are not abiding by the law and by any rules that the FTC develops and by the statements on the privacy policies. So it's really a huge amount of regulation on one specific use of technology.
Wow, it's wild. As you mentioned, this is just looking at the privacy implications of this. There are, of course, many safety concerns, but it's interesting to see this get at the privacy usage of it. And one of the key uses of drones as of late has been news gathering. It's been used a lot by journalists all over the country. We saw it, with various, demonstrations that have been going on lately, the use of drones to get a bird's eye view of these. And of course, these journalists now are going to be subject to, or not are going to be, but under such legislation would be subject to all these privacy regulations. And with that, are there potential First Amendment concerns that would come with this type of privacy regulation? Is this something we're going to have to, where we're going to see a potential clash of these two issues in the future? What are the First Amendment concerns, basically?
Well, from my point of view, there are fairly significant significant First Amendment concerns associated with these privacy regulations. I'll be upfront. I have a bias. I'm a former journalist. I represent media companies and media organizations. And I can say that I can't remember the last technology that journalists were so excited about, because drones really give the potential to access images and video of things that you never would have been able to see, natural disasters, protests, also just really cool images of sporting events. There have been some high school games that they get these amazing images that the whole community can enjoy. So this isn't just a theoretical thing. This is something that journalists really are excited about. And what's concerning about this legislation is that it requires journalists to gather news in a specific way. They would have to get consent before they take any images that would show an individual. They would need to anonymize images, which basically would mean blurring them out or not using them at all. There are so many restrictions that this bill would place on journalists and anyone else who's gathering information. And the Supreme Court and other federal courts have, for decades, found that there are very serious First Amendment concerns, more so than almost any other type of government regulation, with a regulation that says you cannot publish certain content or you must edit certain content. That's just about the biggest First Amendment violation that you could think of. So I think that that's the main concern here. A second First Amendment concern that I have is that it really regulates only one type of technology. And our history of regulating one type of technology in the United States has not been good, because in 10 years, there's probably going to be something other than drones. And this is just regulating drones and model aircraft. So the concern here is that you're really focusing on regulating this one type of technology that's used for news gathering. And there's not really much rationale for that. We have other laws on the books, a number of privacy laws, paparazzi laws, wiretapping laws, all sorts of things that prevent really intrusive behavior regardless of the technology. And I would suggest that we pay closer attention to those laws, because they're technology neutral and they would address privacy violations regardless of what form they're being used in.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, that's a great point. There are laws on the books as far as right to privacy, right to publicity, those different types of things, and that's really seems like that's what should apply here. Of course, you want to have regulation around safety. You don't want these things to be hitting power lines or commercial aircraft or anything like that. But when it comes to privacy, drones get this dirty word, but they really have been quite amazing in terms of the work that they've been doing lately. So this is going to be an interesting area to watch. It sounds like there's a lot of work that needs to be done to make sure that kind of the Congress's perspective meets, what we're seeing in the real world nowadays. But it's going to be an interesting issue to watch for sure. Once again, that was Jeff Kosseff of Covington and Burling. For more of his insight on this subject, be sure to stay tuned to InsidePrivacy.com, where I'm sure I'll keep us all up to date on what's going on in this space. Thanks again for joining me, Jeff.
Thanks for having me.